know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya.
Hi everybody, welcome to the African Ancestry Live. As you can tell, I'm not Gina Page. I am your regular producer, Wendi Cherry, and I am so excited to be here with you all tonight. We have a really good show, of course, and we're going to get right into it. Hi, Plachette. So come on in, everybody. Just come on in, and we are going to tell us where you're from. Do what we normally do. You know the drill, everybody. Tell us where you're from. Fly your flag. Rep your set, as they say. Come on in, and we're going to have a great topic tonight. November is all about consciousness and identity. So, here at African Ancestry, we're big on being conscious of who we are, being aware of who we are. But this night, we are pairing that with health. So we're going to have a really good show for you. So I need the first person. Hey, Jonathan, how are you? So the first person who came on who has not, I repeat, has not won a prize yet, you all will win an identity box. So this is what the prize looks like. Look at this. This is amazing. It has beautiful artwork. It has Black History flashcards. It has Top Chef recipe cards. It has the journal, and it has stickers. So it looks like, from what I can tell, Kevin has not won before. So Kevin Nelson, if you have not won before, because I feel like, Jonathan, you have won. Jonathan, let me know if you've won. But if you have, we're always going to pick the person who has not won. We're trying to spread this love around. So Kevin, my winner, email us. So email us at info@africanancestry.com, and we will send you your prize. So again, welcome. Come on in. I'm Wendi. I'm usually behind the scenes. I'm holding it down for Dr. Gina tonight. I'm super excited, and I'm super excited about our guest. So again, go ahead and Kevin, send us your address, and we're going to get right into it. So our guest tonight is Dr. Nazirahk Amen. So let me tell you a little bit about him, but of course, we love for people to say who they are. So Dr. Amen is a naturopathic doctor. He's a homeopath, a Chinese medicine practitioner, an organic farmer, and the founder of Wisdom Path Healing Center. And he's right here in the DMV in Tacoma, Maryland, which is a part of the District, Maryland, and Virginia. So he's here. We're going to have a great conversation. We're not going to let Dr. Gina down. We're going to have some great questions for him, and we're going to bring him right on. So welcome, Dr. Amen.
Greetings, everyone.
We're excited to have you. So everybody, put up a green vegetable, whichever green vegetable. Let's get into these emojis and throw up a green vegetable to welcome our guest, Dr. Amen. And so, Dr. Amen, we want to get right into it. Jonathan has not won before. Okay, so Jonathan, you good? Hey, Yakota. Hey, Montreal. Hey, Robert. Hey, Angel. Lori. I see Cameroon, the Sierra Leone flags in the house. Thank you, Robert, for that. Looks like a little bit of cabbage there. Okay. Anything green, go ahead and put that in the comments for us. Thank you. So we're going to get right into it. So Dr. Amen, thank you again. So this is our African Ancestry family. Many of them are test takers. Many of them are becoming conscious of who they are based on their test results. But Kenya, hey. So I met you at a conference a few years ago, and then I actually came to visit you for myself. And then as a studying health coach, I came to shadow you one time. And I'm just amazed at all of the amazing things that you're doing over at Wisdom Path. And I wanted you to kind of give us an overview of how you got to be where you are and how you became the person that you are, but we're going to use the story of you, a story that you posted on your Instagram. So let me show this picture of Dr. Amen. Look at him, all sharp at the science fair, y'all. He at the science fair. Okay. So tell us the story about you being at this science fair and how this specific incident changed your life.
Well, so that's me with my the principal there, Dr. Hudson, and Ms. Hallman, my 5th grade teacher. I think I was 10. That was 1977, and basically, this social studies project won all the way up to the state children's division. So it was beautiful. So the story I posted about this situation was that, so 2 weeks before, so I won the in Louisiana, you have parishes and then you have regional, and then there's like a state fair. So about 3 weeks before the state fair, I was going out with a friend to the store, and it was, for me, like, I used to ride a skateboard everywhere. So one of the first times I walked off without my skateboard, and I ended up coming out of the store, and I walked into the street, blindsided by a telephone pole, and I walked into an oncoming truck. And so in that, so the ambulance comes, I kind of flipped over the truck. The ambulance comes. I remember my mom coming and watching my mom pass out. She took a look at me and passed out, and then I must have gone out right after her, because the EMTs, the medics that came to pick me up, it seemed like they were handling me kind of rough. And then I get to the hospital, and the first thing that happened, the doctor comes in. The main doctor of the hospital comes storming into the ER, and he says, "Where's that little nigger that ran into my son's truck?" So I'm like, whoa. And so all I could think of was, y'all got to get him away from me. Like, get this fool away from me. And so, so fast forward the 3 weeks, I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital. And then the social studies, it was social studies fair. So the social studies fair was the next week. So I went there. I had a whole bunch of skin taken off my face, and I was pretty beat up. And so they asked me. So I won the children's division, and there was the overall prize. So the judges come up and they asked me, and I don't know how they came up with this, but so they asked me what happened. I said, I got hit by the car. And then I told him about, the way the doctor acted. And he asked me what I wanted to be, and I said a paramedic. And I said, no one should be treated like that. So I want to be a medic to make sure that people who are injured, that they don't have to go through this. And so the man's reply to me was, the judge, he said, well, if you were a paramedic and a Klansman needed help, and and you went to help him and he refused your help, would you still help? And I said, yes. And so legally, of course, that's the wrong answer. But, for me, it was the right answer as a kid who was 10 years old. So fast forward, I went through, so that was that.
Okay.
And then I went off to Xavier. I did my undergrad at Xavier in New Orleans, and I ended up acting a fool and trying to pledge a fraternity, getting booted out on disciplinary probation. So my parents were like, "You need to come home," and it opened up that the university right near my parents' house had just started a paramedic program.
Okay.
I ended up taking that program.
Okay.
And so I started Xavier pre-pharmacy, and I ended up becoming an EMT intermediate. And I went back, so this is 1987.
Okay.
And so from 1987 to 1990 or 1991, I worked as an EMT, an intermediate level EMT, first on the in emergency room, and then 2 years on the streets of New Orleans working for the 911 system. So this was at the height of the whole crack epidemic.
Okay.
The whole city and community was falling apart. The community where I grew up at was falling apart. You know, the brothers all my age, either you were like either a user or a seller, and it was a lose-lose situation on both ends of that. So we watched the whole kind of community fall apart.
Right.
And so, and for me on a personal level, I just kept getting sort of like sicker the more, you know, so I worked as a medic, and you know, when you work as a medic, you're just like the police. So you can go to any donut shop or 7-Eleven and they like fill you up with crap. And so my health was getting worse. And so I started asking about, you know, how could I change my own health? And even with the way things were going with my own life, I needed a cure. And so in that sense, I changed my lifestyle. I went through a period where the sister I was with during this whole process gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that was like the wake-up call. I was an honor student the whole way up, you know, into junior year of college, and had never read a book outside of a book that was issued by school.
Right.
And so that woke me up, and I went through this whole like, you know, conscious awakening in terms of Blackness. You know, I was, you know, Sheik Anta Diop, Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Ben, you know, Dr. Clark, all the brothers who really, yeah. So that was sort of an awakening for me. And I always had a question like, you know, brothers in Africa were so conscious. What were they doing that we weren't doing here, that we're not doing here? And so that question eventually led me, and of course, the culmination of African society, as far as I'm concerned, was Kemet, in terms of the realization that we are truly spiritual beings. And Kemet, you know, in the way that when we think of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or what's really called the Pert Emru, which is the Book of Awakening, you know, it ties something that we're not conscious of in this society, which we live in this society where our religio-philosophical system is really based on our economic system. And so in that whole system is this kind of live it up, and he who has the most toys at the end wins.
Right.
And so in that process, what they dropped off is is rebirth. Do you understand? And so then we live and the biggest fear everyone has is death, you know, whereas our ancestors, they overcame that. You know, the book of Coming Forth by Day maps out the afterlife from one life to the next. And so, you know, imagine what it would be if people understood like that we, you know, reincarnated over and over, and like this life is not just about, you know, material gain, that it's really a spiritual journey, and we all have our different lessons that we need to learn. And so for me, that awakening led me to embrace, you know, like, I guess in many ways, I was striving to embrace a form of Black nationalism in a way, but I would say Black self-sufficiency in terms of us really learning how to support ourselves. And so anyway, so that was really, that all led me to meditation. And so when you fast forward to where I am now, I spent 3 years in a sort of in a spiritual community. The focus is meditation. And, you know, the height of that is that, you know, the discernment, you know, the truth that we are spiritual beings. And so we have to discover what that really means. And then as we sort of use these practices like meditation, and, you know, different meditation is not an end. Meditation is a means to an end. The end is the realization that, you know, we're one with all beings and one with our surroundings. And so I think once we have that experience, then, you know, life sort of changes, you know. So for me, once I got to a certain level of awareness, then it's really about building presence. You understand? And so to really become soul brothers and soul sisters, which is we're channeling the energy of our souls through our day-to-day life. Like we live in a society where we become human doings, and it's really about being a human being.
Yeah,
And
because I
so
want to put it in there for you though, Dr. Amen, because that's kind of like what most of our family members here, we call African ancestry family members, everybody who's on the call. And so if you guys
beautiful.
are meditators, give us a thumbs up. If you are, I'm taking this 9-month study on the silence and the value in the silence. And
Right.
that's also a part of meditation. And some people think that meditation is just sitting there doing the om. My brain doesn't even work like that. I'm
Right.
here as a moving meditator, and that helps me connect, and that helps me
Okay.
feel, better. So everybody, so you have Menelik saying that he connects, the Dejan meditates. Like, I think that we want to be clear that meditation comes in different forms.
Right, for
And
sure.
it's all for, for our consciousness and to help us connect with ourselves, with the creator, and co-create with ourselves. What do you think about that?
Well, yes, I think, spirituality is meditation in action. So we come to certain realizations in meditation, and then life is really about, living truth at the crossroads, which means that in our day-to-day experience, we get to, put that higher understanding into practice. And so in that, then, this is how we grow. So that I truly believe.
No judgment. Look, it's no judgment, because Soda and Purty, when we asked if they meditate, they put like the Grinch grin up,
Right.
like I need to be.
It's all good. Well,
Everybody
life brings us all what we need.
everybody comes in on it at their own, because back when I first was introduced to meditation in this specific way, it was from Deepak and Oprah. And I'm not even gonna lie, Dr. Amen, I was asleep.
Right.
I was not woke. It was
Right.
like 20-minute, meditation each time. And I would be waking up when he was
Right.
like, it's over,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah, you got to be able to relate to it.
Right.
And, it comes in time when it's time.
True.
So, I guess what I would have called meditation 20 years ago, or actually it's been 30 years ago, it is not the same, in terms of where I am today and just understanding knowledge, consciousness. And, again, for me, the practice is really about cultivating the presence.
Okay.
And then spirituality is that like living out that presence in, my day-to-day life. And so there's no goals. I tell people I ain't trying to like be enlightenment, be righteous, or none of that crap. I'm just trying to just be and accept all that comes, both the good and the bad, and be at peace through all of it. And so I think,
is that like, how do you, a patient who comes to you at the wisdom path, to your practice, and they're having these ailments and they're having these things going on, how, if they have been used to getting a prescription, do you come and say meditate? Like, how do you
it depends on who it is.
Okay.
It really depends on who you have to. I, as a practitioner, have to meet people where they are.
Correct.
And, people come to see me. Most of the people come word of mouth, and somebody knew somebody and said, this is the person you need to go to, but they don't even know what I do.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, when they're sick, they don't really care what I do. They just want to know if I can help them or not. And so
what do you do?
do you do? Well, so going back, so we have to start at the beginning. So what is disease, right? Disease is a posture. And so it's stuck energy. It's a place that, so when we think about who we are, so let's say we are the creator, a spark of the creator going through this physical experience, which means that we are, we have a lot of capability, and we're very dynamic. And so in Chinese medicine, health is about, yin and yang, right? So you have this circle which embraces both the good and the bad, day and night, the pair of opposites, no matter how you look at it, right?
Okay.
So we're a non-dual being, which means we transcend that pair of opposites, but we're living through that pair of opposites, right? And so it's about getting our energy, our chi, to flow freely through the pair of opposites. And so what happens is we get stuck, right? And so the common example that I use is, so let's say you take your little trip to where, Cameroon.
Cameroon and
All
Sierra
right.
Leone.
So you go up in the hills of Cameroon and y'all on your journey, and you decide you're gonna, take a walk up in the mountains, and you start walking in the mountains, and the next thing you know, you looking at a lion, right? Or a tiger, right?
Okay.
So what's a healthy thing to do in that situation?
Run.
Fast, right?
Right.
And so let's say, 2 weeks, a month later, you walking through your neighborhood here in the DMV, and the neighbor's cat comes running at you, right? And then the neighbor finds you up in the tree, right? And so the first thing you're going to say is, whoa, I didn't even realize I was in your tree. And then you'll say, I'm tripping, and then you might even tell the story. I was in the jungle the other day. I almost got eaten by this lion. I got away, and now I'm a little struck by that, right? And so, but that event fixated your energy in a way. So let's say now it's like 2-3 months down the line, you're at work, and the boss starts yelling, and you have the same reaction.
Yep.
And you tripping, right? Right. Huh?
Yeah. It's like an imprint.
Right. And so you start trying to suppress it, right? You start trying to manage the reaction.
Yeah.
Right. You go to sleep at night and you have dreams. You might get in an argument with somebody, and then you go to sleep that night, and then you like beating somebody up in their sleep, or getting beat up in your sleep. Right. So that incident left an imprint. And in this case, you're stuck in this fight or flight, getting away from like dire life and death.
Okay.
And so it doesn't matter what situation you go through, this is how you're going to experience, right? So, and for many of us, it doesn't have anything to do with that, right? It could be nobody told me what to do, right? And so, or somebody wasn't there for me. So it's not an active kind of a threat. Sometimes it's a passive kind of thing.
Right.
But however we come to life and we get stuck, whatever that pattern is, right? So our disease is a posture. And that posture doesn't allow us to be present in the moment, right?
Okay.
So again, we go through a situation. And so in Chinese medicine, we're supposed to be dynamic. We have anger, we have happiness, we have sadness, we have nervousness,
all the human emotions,
and fear.
Yeah.
We have all of the emotions. So I go and I see the line, I experience fear, boom. If I'm healthy, done with that, right? If somebody just tells me like one of their relatives passed away, I should be able to mourn with them, right? Without getting stuck in mourning.
Right.
One of my coworkers come up and say, something happened to them, or, somebody standing there with their foot on your toe, and you're like, hey, could you get your foot off my toe? And then, a few minutes later, you're like, hey, could you really get your foot off my toe? And the next thing you know, they across the room somewhere, you got angry, you expressed anger. And if you're healthy, it's over, right? You're not
like an emotional discharge. Like you
right.
have
So you're not thinking about like, oh, I should have, next time I see them, I'm going to kick their teeth in, like all of our emotions should meet the circumstance that we're in, right? We should be able to adjust our emotions to the circumstance, move through it. So if somebody tells you, hey, my parents died in a car accident, and you start laughing, like, okay, something's not right here, right?
Right.
So all of us get stuck in our different ways. And it's not just the emotional state. And in Chinese medicine, those emotional states correspond to different organs in the body.
Okay,
right?
so let me give you an example. I was really angry with somebody and I wasn't allowed an emotional discharge. And so my Dr. Patel said that I'm angry and that my liver needed some support. Is that
Exactly.
what you're talking about? Okay.
Yep. So anger in Chinese medicine is the wood element, which is stored in the liver, right?
Okay.
Which is sadness is you know, in a different organ. Fear lives in the kidneys. So the whole fight or flight, which, you know, makes sense from epinephrine, norepinephrine, those hormones are produced in the kidneys, which is that whole fear-based hormone system.
Okay.
So sadness lives in the lungs. Happiness lives in the heart. So the whole nervousness lives in our digestive system. So the whole idea of like a knot in your stomach because something feeling that something bad is about to happen, right? So if you're getting ready for an exam and it's an important exam, then it's normal to have that feeling. But if you just go through life and wake up every morning and there's a knot in your stomach thinking about going through the day, then that's a problem, right? You're stuck in one particular. So we should be dynamic.
But let me ask you this though, Dr. Amen, about being dynamic and with people, especially people of African descent.
It does not mean being schizophrenic about your identity.
No, I'm not talking about that part. What I'm talking
right.
about is, what do you think about, so we know that we're going to talk specifically to African ancestry, you know, family members, right? So say we have come from and now able to trace to a certain country on the continent. And if we have gone through and our ancestors have gone through the enslavement Holocaust, does that also live in our body? And does what happened to our grandmothers live in our body? And could we potentially
in Chinese medicine, we get qi from 3 places, right? The first place that we get energy from is our what we call the Jing. And the Jing means our genetics through our ancestry, right? And so we get both good energy from that place and we get the negative energy from that place.
Okay.
So the second place we get energy is from our environment. So, you know, whether we live in Southeast and there's gunshots happening everywhere, or we live somewhere calm in the Northwest and, or, you know, on a peaceful lake somewhere, these are different environments. Whether we grow up eating, you know, the best of organic foods and, or, you know, eating, living off of Twinkies, you know, all these things play, but that's environment, right? Whether we watch TV or we don't watch TV, we can sort of adjust that.
Right.
But the third place that we get energy is really from living our purpose, is from connecting our heart and our mind and living up to whatever spiritual journey we have, which no one on the outside can really tell us what that is. So, you know, the idea of identity needs to be healthy in order for us to be able to really attune to what that purpose is, you know. So like, you know, in you know, the Native American tradition, they have like, they do this sweat lodge and then they send their kids off for, you know, for the vision quest. And in that vision quest, they go through this thing where they commune with nature and, you know, get the vision for the purpose in their life. So of course, in Africa and all of these traditions, you had different rituals that people went through where that facilitated this. And so we live in a society where the rituals have been empty because the religio-philosophical system is all based in some crap that says that material gain trumps everything. So money equals this money level of prosperity is wealth trumps everything, right? It's not your health is your wealth. It's money is it, right? And so that's the big lie that we all have to like wake up from.
Well, I think Steve Jobs was a perfect example. He had all the money in the world, but he still was.
And he was miserable. Well, look at this last fool that we all had to look at for 4 years. I mean, look how miserable he was. And they have full access to money. So money does, we know that that's a delusion, right?
And money is also an energy.
And yet we're pushed to become, we look at what's happening in the general society today with these corporations taking over our lives and the lives of our kids and push us into more and more levels of like commercialism, right? And all of it is geared towards us never being able to access anything that's true to who we are. Do you understand? Because the more we don't know who we are, the more others get to take advantage of us, right?
So
That's
this,
why they let white folk listen to gangster rap, you know. They're like, yeah, listen to that because we can get you to be a consumer too. Like,
right.
you
And that's
know.
because this is why people are here. And this is why, a group of people take the
Right.
African ancestry test to kind of figure out where they're from. And I
Right.
think that when you know where you're from, like knowledge of self is a principle. And when you know who you are and where you're from, that also supports your healing. But I know that you are able to help
So
people in
so
other.
when people come in, let's go back to the question. When people come in, you know, so if our disease is a posture,
Okay.
and so and our the level of illness that we have is the difference between the way that we perceive the world and the way that the world really is, right? So
Mhm.
so however much our perception is off, that's the degree that we're sick. Do you understand? So if we walk around and we see squares everywhere, but everything is really round, then we got issues. Do you understand? And so health and healing is about helping people bring their perception back into alignment with reality. Do you
Okay.
understand?
Yeah.
And so a lot of us, like when we buy into these fake lives, right? We start to, and we're not true to us. Then we have to use energy that's not our own energy. You know, we start going into our store bank. So let's say the genetic sheet. Let's say our parents lived to be 100, and we
Okay.
can say they lived to be 100, and they was eating pork chops, and granddaddy, he used to drink a half a fifth, you know, every other weekend. And, you know, but they didn't have the stressors that we have in a different way, because this food that they're putting out here right now ain't the food that he was eating. You
Correct.
understand?
Yes.
This crap that we're dealing with, like they are really, you know, corn and soy is the basis of everything. GMOs are the basis of everything.
And what
And
does GMO
so even
mean?
when you're eating the chicken, you're not eating chicken, you're eating some corn and some soy, because that corn and soy grew that chicken in 42 days, whereas a normal chicken would have grown in like 6 months. You
Right.
know, you eat a piece of beef, grass-fed beef takes 2 years to go to market, right?
Oh, okay.
This stuff that they got up there that looks like beef, that was done in 6 months. And
Right.
so everything is overgrowing and people are overgrowing. So there's a huge part of what I do, which is the lifestyle part, which is really just educating people about, you know, what's happening with the food system. This is not normal. This is a huge experiment that's happening. You understand? And so at the core of what we do is teaching people, you know, like what's real about food, and from a self-sustenance point of view, and from a community sustainability point of view, understanding that one of the biggest, I tell people this all the time, one of the most revolutionary things you can ever do is grow your own food, you know.
Well, I have a picture of you up here on your tractor with your family.
Yep.
So, in addition to being a naturopathic doctor and a Chinese traditional medicine doctor and an acupuncturist and an herbalist and all those things, you also are an organic farmer with your family. And so
Right.
you all,
So
everybody.
so this whole thing happened, you know, as a naturopathic doctor. One of the main things that we do is like help people change their lifestyle. So you have to empower them, you know. So we started early on teaching, like, you know, small cooking classes.
Mhm.
And so at one point, these cooking classes we did a few through our home. And so basically, what would happen there was people would come over, we'd take them out into the yard, pick some food, and then come back in, prepare the food that we picked. And people had never seen some of this food growing in the ground. Like, wow, this is interesting to see what broccoli looks like. It's interesting to pick a sweet potato. Oh, this is what a tomato looks like on the vine. You know, so then they started asking us how to help them grow food.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how Purple Mountain Organics was started. And so for the last 10 years, we've been doing custom farming, or what do you call it, contract farming at the University of DC. So we've grown rice, we do grains, we've grown einkorn, we've grown kamut, which is like an ancient wheat that was grown in Kemet. We do sorghum and millet, of course, which is of course African grains. So we grow but the goal is to grow as much of our own food as we can in our society. So even me as a vegetarian, before we would grow a lot of like vegetables, but we could never like grow the grains. And so we've gotten to the point where we can grow, 95% of everything that comes across my plate is something that I grew.
Wow.
And so that's how much I'm really, trying to reinforce to people, like, you need to have a connection to your food source. The most empowering thing that you could do for yourself is to make that connection, because it's getting that simple in terms of what this stuff is actually doing to people. And so I want to tell you,
I have a person who has a question called Dealing the Real. What are some of the high chi foods that you suggest?
well, we can talk about that. I mean, there's the ones that you grow yourself is my main answer to that. Or the one are to know your farmer.
Yeah.
Have some connection with where it's coming from. But what I'm trying to say, ultimately, I've had arguments with people before about food, and I think food is a secondary source of energy, because if you're attuned, so in Chinese medicine, you have these three sources of energy, right? Your genetics, your environment, and then your purpose. So if we're living in our purpose, then we invoke by living in our purpose. You could say, that scene in the in from ancient Kemet where Heru listened to Tahuti, which was his intuition, and once he connected with that, he was able to get access into higher energy. In the Christian tradition, there's this concept of, thy will, not my will, which is when we're living in our highest purpose, the energy of the creator comes and moves through us. And so the energy that we use to go through our day-to-day life is not even our own energy. We get energized from doing work. Do you understand? So let's bring that back to food, because what needs to be healed for Black folk is our connection to food. Because slavery, when we think of slavery, and I grew up in a town where it was sweet potatoes that was the main thing that was grown. And so this was on the waxing of that whole sweet potato industry. And so there was a truck that would come down our street. And so all the winos and the really brothers who didn't have any potential whatsoever, they were the ones who got on that truck, right? And so it was like, if you get on that truck, you're a loser. Like, so get your education and get up out of here so that you never have to get on that truck, right?
Okay.
So there's this negative connotation about us tapping into agriculture, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is something that you want to get away from and do better for yourself, right? And so in that process, what we've lost is two things. So I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. So we've been growing rice, which is not something that grows in the Mid-Atlantic. We actually had a USDA grant through the UDC that allowed us to develop a methodology to grow rice in the Mid-Atlantic, right?
Okay.
And so from that, we've been able to teach other farmers in this region how to grow rice, but connect with people all over who are growing rice. So some of the people who are growing rice right now so I import used Japanese farm equipment. And so we connected with some farmers who are down in South Carolina who revived the rice system in South Carolina. So South Carolina was the richest state in the US because of rice production. Those rice farmers became the richest people in the world off the backs of Black people. And so just to a couple of years ago, I'm going to switch up a little bit and then I'll bring it back. A couple of years ago, I grew some sugar cane. When I grew this sugar cane, I posted a picture on social media, and my brother was like, "Hey man, did you know that, where we built our house, when we were growing up, we built it on the spot where my grandfather and his brothers had their sugarcane mill." So I never knew that. Like,
Okay.
I had no idea, even though I grew up black in the South, and you had to have something to do with some agriculture, but we had no idea what that was. So that was the first time I heard my grandparents ran a sugarcane mill, and they made the syrup out of the sugarcane for everybody in the county, in the parish.
Okay.
So that was a revelation. So
Mhm.
my mom's father came out of the rice fields, right? And so I went down to South Carolina, and so I got to visit these rice fields. And so it took 14 years for the slaves to come here and transform that forest into a rice field. Do you
Sierra
understand how
Leoneans,
long that was?
Dr. Amen, Sierra Leoneans are the majority of the people.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to say this. So
Peasants.
when I went down there, after I went down there, I took my family to the African American Museum in downtown DC. And then there was this history about rice. And so in 1815, um, basically, you couldn't bring in slaves into the States anymore, right? Rice production in Louisiana didn't kick in until like the middle 1800s. So those people who started off rice production in Louisiana were slaves who were brought there from South Carolina. So my grandfather from my mom's side probably came right out of South Carolina.
Yep.
And so I wanted to show you all this book. Ooh, which way? Here you go.
There it is, right there.
Right there. So it's Black Rice, and then the author is here. Y'all can see that. Judith Carney, The African Origins of Rice Cultivations in America. So this book shows that, from a self-esteem point of view, from a understanding of what really happened in slavery, right? Our ancestors weren't the most passive. When Tarzan used to come on, I used to be rooting for Tarzan, right? We all probably used to root for Tarzan, right?
Right.
But our ancestors wasn't a bunch of monkeys swinging through trees. When these Europeans pulled up to, from Senegal to, what is it?
Guinea-Bissau.
Sierra Leone,
Mhm.
Gambia,
Mhm.
all that area, they pulled into these vast rice paddies
Right.
that was everywhere. And it was all this way of doing rice that was a hydraulic system of doing rice, which is the same system that you find in South Carolina. This is how they came here. And, just like I'm sure a lot of other people, instead of starving, they showed these white people what to do. And then they got taken advantage of, or really they saw what they were doing and they enslaved the whole village and was like, we bringing y'all over here to do what y'all was doing over there.
Right.
And so, but once you understand that these were skilled workers,
Right.
this wasn't people who just got whipped into submission and was, like, just this way that we understand slaves is just the dumbest of the dumb. Like, you ain't nothing, you ain't gonna never be nothing, you was never nothing, and you come from nothing, right?
Right.
So in that way, our root chakra to our connection, African Americans are the most acculturated group of people on the face of planet Earth. We're the only ones who endured 300 400 years of straight acculturation.
Yes.
Where you can't have any connection. So you take any other immigrant in the US, that is not their plight. They have some kind of connection, some kind of like basic cultural self-esteem that we just don't have, and we've been here.
Yeah.
And then you look at how they flip this game, in that they've taken the worst part of that acculturation and thrown that into the mainstream to get other people to be consumers. Do you understand? Because when you take people's identity away from them, then you can get them to do anything.
Right.
And
Which is
so they're using
important, and identity
this
is important.
toxic part of the culture to get all kinds of people around the world to do crazy stuff to themselves. They're taking people's self-esteem, and people are volunteering to be this person with no identity.
Right.
And I didn't want to say the N word, but like that's basically what you're volunteering for.
So now there's a question here.
Yes,
Chinyeri wants to know, is rice a healthy food for African Americans?
of course. So what? But what you have to again, rice is a healthy food, but where can you get healthy
Where
rice?
do you get it? Organic.
Right. Well, and it's not even organic. So the issue with rice, one, there's two issues with rice. Rice, grown traditionally, uses rice production produces a lot of methane, right? So methane is one of the global warming gases, and it happens because stuff is put the rice is flooded in a paddy in the field, right?
Okay.
And so the longer it sits in that paddy, the more global warming gases. But from a health perspective, most of the rice that we eat in America has been grown on land that has been used where they grew tobacco and what's the other thing? Cotton. And when they grew tobacco and cotton on that land, they used these fungicides that had heavy metals in them.
Okay.
So rice as a plant is able to pick up all kinds of things from its environment.
Okay.
And so it will pick up the heavy metals. So where can you find rice that's not full of arsenic and cadmium is more the question, right?
Okay. All right.
And so, that's why buying organic rice can help, but really, even then, you have to make sure it wasn't grown in some of these soils. So, and the other thing with rice that I should mention is even when you find healthy rice, you don't know when it was hulled. So brown rice, so rice is normally brown rice, and then they take the husk off. Well, rice is a husk. And then you take the husk off and you have brown rice.
Okay.
Africans traditionally have grown rice that's brown rice. There's a red rice, and then there's also black rice.
Okay.
And so one of the stories about rice, right? So there's been in the media just not many years ago, it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, was that so there's the indica form of rice and there's the japonica form of rice. And so the japonica we think came from Africa is what I believe.
Okay.
No, Gabriola, that's the name of the rice that came from Africa.
Okay.
And so there was a rice a couple years ago. So there's this whole movement right now. Like the people in South Carolina are trying to bring back the Carolina Gold, this traditional rice that was grown there. But there's a whole stigma around that because Carolina Gold was grown using a whole bunch of slave labor, right? And so then, like, what are we really bringing back? If we going back to tradition, that's like, when they say, make it great again, what are you talking about? Because when it was great, like you talking about, it wasn't great for us.
Right.
So we ain't trying to, we ain't going there, no way, right? But there's these food historians, and brother just did the piece on Netflix.
I'm high on the hog.
Yeah. So part of that story was
Michael Twitty, the chef.
Yes. Michael Twitty is the chef. So Michael Twitty goes around sleeping in slave quarters trying to figure out what these people were eating, 100 years ago.
Sierra Leone, by the way, which was crazy because he does all this, but he's taken the African ancestry test.
Oh, nice.
Sierra Leone. So it's just
nice. So yeah, the brothers down there, they have a direct link. The whole Geechee Gula culture, Gucci, they are directly linked to rice culture in West Africa. So so there's a story about what's this man? Thomas Jefferson went over and they thought he got this African rice, and rice was not used for marketing. So during the Revolutionary War, that there was England freed slaves so that they could fight on the side of the English, right? And they promised them that if they lost, they would give them 40 acres and a mule somewhere, right? And so when they lost, that happened. And so these brothers and sisters went to Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were given 40 acres and a mule in Trinidad. And so one of the things that they took to Trinidad was this rice that Thomas Jefferson brought back to the US and had people growing like as their own food rice, right? So
Okay.
these people in Trinidad had been growing this rice for like the last, 100 years, or 150 years. And so they just made the link of where that rice came from, right? So that rice came through us, through America.
Yep.
And so this whole food history thing about, where does people food come from? And
Yeah.
so, but originally we thought that that rice was actually a rice that was an African rice that was brought back here by Thomas Jefferson. And so this is the kind of, some of the stuff that comes up in food history, but there's definitely, rice is one of the foods that white people had rice when they came here, but the rice they had came from China through the
Okay.
Silk Road,
Okay.
right? The rice that was in Africa was the Oryza glaberrima, which is a different rice than they grow in China.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a deep connection there.
Okay.
So, yes, rice
Can
is
they
a
come
healthy
to
food.
Can they come to Purple Mountain though, or do you ship?
It's so yeah, if you're local, it's Purple Mountain Grown
Okay.
.net. And
Okay.
and we're in the farmers market in Tacoma Park, and we're in the farmers market at DuPont Circle during the wintertime.
Okay.
Yep.
So then
So
also,
we grow a number of grains. All of them are healthy. We can talk about other grains. So rice can be healthy, but if you got high blood sugar or high glycemic index, you should not be eating no rice. So there's other grains you can eat, like the sorghum and the millet, and which are low gluten and way better for you. Another one that comes from our ancestors is einkorn, which is an ancient version of wheat that doesn't have a high gluten profile at all.
okay.
So we've talked about a lot of things, and I know we're kind of getting close
We
to.
have like 7 minutes left. So
Okay.
I want to tie it together.
Yep.
So the first thing was the identity piece, and that it is important. But for like 2 to 3 minutes, I would just like you to talk about, you're saying that the three things that impact us are our genetics, our is the environment, and then our purpose. So as we are awakening, specifically people who
Right.
have taken our test, they're awakening. Everybody's awakening. I think 2020 was the year of awakening. What can we do, or what do you suggest to some of your patients to really connect into their purpose? Name a few things that they can do.
Well, just sitting, that's one.
Yeah,
Life brings
breathing.
you to your purpose. Life always brings us to our purpose.
Okay.
And so, and when we don't get it from the light side, it comes from the dark side, like
Oh,
in a
yeah.
society that is here to suppress people's purpose, right? Which is what we're living in. The
Yes.
way that many of us come to our purpose is through the dark side, is through the path of addiction, because addictions are a form of seeking enlightenment. It's a
Yeah.
way that we're trying to get out of the situation that we're in. And so addictions bring us to our edges, right?
Yeah.
So and for many of us, it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. I would argue that, crack is no different than a piece of cake.
True.
If you got
Yes.
diabetes and the doctor's telling you if you eat one more piece of cake, your blood sugar is going to go through the roof, like then you ain't no different than somebody on the corner who's doing illicit drugs. Like you're harming yourself, and yet you can't stop doing the substance that's harming you.
Right.
And so in many ways, diabetes has wreaked more havoc on our communities than a drug like crack.
Yeah, it's a pandemic, just
Yeah.
like COVID. It's a
So
pandemic.
yeah, and it's the food system. So that's why I'm saying we have to reconnect with the food. We have to realize how important this is.
Yeah.
And in order to because and it's also, I was part of growing up, I was part of a church, and in this church came a Black priest, right?
Okay.
And this man bought Father McKnight, AJ McKnight. He was part of SNCC. He was part of he started the Southern Cooperative.
Okay.
And he postulated, like, he bought this big piece of property. He was all about giving out these micro loans way before, this man in India started micro loans. He started figuring out, he was like, you can't preach to people if they're starving.
Correct.
They can't hear nothing about the Lord if their bellies are hungry, right? And so, you can't talk to people if it's 10 of them living in a room. You understand? So you have to like help people with their basic needs. And so, but what he did was he created Fathering Nights. There was a Winn-Dixie that closed down in the town, a big supermarket, and then he opened it up. And he postulated that if 30% of the church shopped there full time, that it would have made it. And all of the food came from Black people, grown by Black people. And Father Knight used to say, Black people think white gas is better than black gas. They think white ice
is colder than the black
is colder than black ice. And so, and it was true. Within 3 years, he had to close down the store. And so it was a huge disappointment. So he moved to just small self-study groups. And his main book was like Tony Browder. He became really good friends with Tony Browder. He was actually the mentor of Father Stalin when Stalin was doing his thing up here. He was kind of he made a huge, I didn't realize how big of a self sustenance experiment this was in terms of Black people. And he concluded, like, we don't have the self-esteem to support each other. And that's a sad thing.
Yeah, we don't. It's a trust issue.
Right. And so anyway, but we have to if we want to do anything as a community, we have to like find that. You understand? Like but more importantly, on a personal level, we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So right now that means, we got to support places like Moms and, My Organic Market and Whole Foods, Whole Paycheck and, crazy stuff like this. But, the more everything gets corporatized, the less you can even trust labels like organic, because you don't know where your food is coming from.
That's correct.
And if you don't know where your food is coming from, then anything can happen to you through that whole system. So, what I do here is really help people. There's an irrational part of disease that we didn't talk about, right? Because that person who's stuck in the jungle, right? We're trying to tell them, hey, it's not a lion, or hey, it's just a rope. And they're like, no, it's a snake. And you're like, no, it's really a rope. And they're like, no, it's a snake. You understand? And so unless you change that perspective so that they can really see like there's no threat. Right. Then you could heal. Yeah. When you get rid of the threat, when you get rid of the irrational part that's not allowing us to be present, to see what's really in front of us. Right. And so we help people change their diet. We help them like shift their perspective in terms of what's real and what's not real. And what's important and what's not important. A lot of times people come in here and they think success is making them that money, and they don't realize like it's an artificial agenda, and they're ruining their health, they're ruining their community, they're ruining their society. Yeah. Through that endeavor, and they're paying for it with their health. And if you got to rush to work and eat McDonald's on the way to get there, then you're not doing. That's not healthy. Like you're just not doing it.
Patients virtually, or because
so right now everything has moved towards we do a lot of telemedicine. And so, but I'm also an acupuncturist, so we have people who come in regularly for acupuncture. So every acupuncture is in person, everything else is telemedicine. And I do natural medicine, so dietary change is a big part of that, but I do homeopathy, I use Western herbs, I use traditional Chinese medicine, Chinese herbs. We do some Ayurvedic herbs. I do some supplementation, but the supplementation we do is not this functional medicine that's out here where we're just trying to like, from a Western scientific perspective, just trying to like supplement everything you think you don't have. That's not how the body works. And so that's not what we're trying to do. Because you might have all of that, but if you're not living your purpose, then it don't mean nothing. And so you have to help people see things, see the whole picture. You know, so when you ask, you know, when do people come into their own light in their own time? And so for me, sometimes you see things with people, but it's not even for you to point that out. They have to be able to see it for themselves.
Correct.
And so I try to hold a space where I don't give people any direction in that way. You have to help people, you know, be the light, and then you invoke the light in other people. And so, you know, that's where I live from. And so, you know, I try to live as much as I preach.
I think that's a beautiful way to be. I
Right,
also think that's a great place to end. Lisa Hayes is giving you like the praise hands because that's deep, Dr. Amen. Like
right,
that's deep. I mean, I think that is a during this time where everybody's against each other, there's so much anxiety, there's so much stress, there's so much
right.
uncertainty.
They're
And
controlling people with fear right now.
yeah, at the very least, letting people be on their own path as much as you can. I'm the same way. I'm learning to be that way. I always wasn't that way, but I'm learning everybody's on their own time, on their own path. And that's just the way it is. And so we wanted to thank you. So everybody, you have to follow Dr. Amen on his Instagram. It's Dr. Farmer Brother. If you can check him out. I have been to his practice. He told me one thing about myself that has changed my life, and I used that lens that he shared with me to see my situation and myself in a different way. So I would suggest checking him out. And also, you know, look at all of the food he has on his IG. He has all this amazing food. You can see he does it with his family. You can see him out there working. Dr. Amen, I was trying to have you on that ancient, like that video you have going through with the aerial. I know you had a drone to do it. I was trying to do that, but it wouldn't play. And I'm so
Okay.
happy because I think people would have loved to see you out there working
Right.
and talking, you know, practicing what you preach. So everybody put up your green vegetables. We're giving Dr. Amen the everybody said it was so much knowledge. They say it was so good. And so next week, we're doing more identity and conscious, y'all. So next week, we're having Erica Totten and we're talking emotional emancipation. And her question to us is going to be, are you truly free? So join us next week. Gina will be back. And like she always says, your immune system is very important. I'm sure Dr. Amen will agree. Your immune system is very important. Please be sure to keep your immune system strong. Keep your mental health strong. Keep your emotional health strong. Like Dr. Amen says, do more, be more than do more. Be more of your human being this week than a human doing this week. And we will see you next week. Peace, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Peace, everyone.